Every morning at Ridgewood High began the same way. Students rushing through the hallways, lockers slamming, laughter bouncing off the walls. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise walked Miguel, the janitor. He moved quietly, pushing his old cleaning cart as if he didn't want to disturb anyone. His uniform was worn, his steps were slow, and his eyes, kind but tired, barely met anyone else's. Most students passed by him without even noticing he existed. To them, he was just the guy who cleans. Nothing more, nothing worth paying attention to. But Miguel carried a presence no one understood, and a past no one knew. That morning, as he bent down to pick up a pile of spilled papers, a group of seniors walked by. The loud kind, the confident kind, the kind that believed the world bent around their footsteps. Tyler, their unofficial leader, smirked when he saw Miguel struggling to gather the papers blown across the hallway. "Look at this guy," Tyler said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Bro can't even pick up trash right." The others laughed, too easily, too loudly. Miguel didn't answer. He simply kept picking up the papers with calm, steady hands. His silence seemed to irritate Tyler even more. "You know he does this because he probably failed at literally everything else," one of the girls added, arms crossed, chewing her gum like she was judging the entire planet. Miguel stood up slowly, holding the papers against his chest. He gave a small, polite smile, the kind you give to keep peace, not because you're happy, and walked away without saying a word. But as he left, a teacher stepped out of a nearby classroom, Ms. Reynolds. She had seen everything. "Is this how you treat people?" she asked the group, her voice sharp but controlled. Tyler rolled his eyes. "Relax, it's just the janitor." The way he said it, just the janitor, as if that erased the man's dignity, his humanity, his story. Ms. Reynolds didn't argue. She just looked at them with an expression that said more than words ever could. Then she turned and continued down the hall. Miguel, already several steps away, had heard everything, and even though he didn't show it, those words landed somewhere deep inside him, somewhere familiar, somewhere wounded. Later that day, while students filled the cafeteria with noise, Miguel sat alone in the empty gym storage room eating his lunch, just a simple sandwich wrapped in foil. The same lunch he'd eaten almost every day for years. It was quiet there, peaceful. The only place he felt invisible in a way that didn't hurt. He took one slow breath, then another, and whispered to himself, something no one else ever heard. "You've survived worse. Keep going." He said it like a promise, like a reminder, like a truth only he understood. But the world outside that tiny storage room had already begun moving toward him, faster than he realized, because something was about to happen at Ridgewood High. Something that would pull Miguel out of the shadows and into the center of everyone's attention. And when he finally spoke, really spoke, no one would ever see him the same way again. The next morning began like any other, but the air felt different. Whispers drifted across the hallways. Teachers moved quickly, their faces tight with concern, and students gathered near the main office, staring at a large notice posted on the wall. Tyler and his friends pushed through the crowd, curious. "What's going on?" Tyler asked. A freshman glanced back nervously. "Some kind of emergency assembly. Everyone has to go to the auditorium." Emergency? That word wasn't common at Ridgewood High. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere was heavy. The principal stood on stage, hands folded, expression serious. Teachers lined the walls. The room buzzed with confusion until the principal raised his hand for silence. "Students," he began, "today we need to address a situation that has affected our school far more than you realize." Miguel stood near the back doors, broom in hand, leaning quietly against the wall. He was there only because he was cleaning between classes. He never attended assemblies. He was almost invisible. But today, fate had placed him inside the room. The principal continued. "In the past few months, Ridgewood High has struggled with division, disrespect, a growing lack of empathy, and yesterday, an incident made it painfully clear that this cannot continue. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The principal paused. Then he turned slightly, as if acknowledging someone out of sight. "And so, I've asked someone who has witnessed the heart of our community to speak today." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Students leaned forward. Teachers exchanged looks. Miguel felt his chest tighten. No, this couldn't be. The principal gestured toward the back. "Miguel, would you come up here?" Every head in the auditorium turned at once. The janitor, the man they passed every day without noticing, the man some mocked openly. Miguel froze. His breath caught in his throat. He wasn't supposed to be seen. He wasn't supposed to stand on a stage. He wasn't supposed to speak. Tyler whispered to his friend, half laughing, "What's he gonna say?" "How to mop the floor." A few snickers spread across the row, but Miguel didn't move. The principal stepped closer. "Miguel, please." Slowly, painfully slowly, Miguel placed the broom against the wall and walked toward the stage. Not a single footstep could be heard over the silence that filled the auditorium. When he reached the center, the principal handed him the microphone. Miguel stared at it as if he were holding something far heavier than metal and wires. He lifted his eyes to the audience. Hundreds of faces staring back at him, some curious, some confused, some skeptical. He swallowed hard, and then he spoke. His voice was low at first, almost trembling. "I never wanted to stand in front of anyone," he began. "I've spent most of my life trying not to be seen." A hush fell over the room. But when people stop seeing you, they stop seeing themselves. They stop seeing what matters. He looked down for a moment, gathering strength. "I've heard things in these hallways," Miguel continued. "Things that hurt more than the work I do. Not because they were said to me, but because they were said about me, about others, about anyone who seems less important." Tyler shifted again, his jaw tightening. Miguel raised his head. "You may think I'm just the janitor, and maybe that's all you need to know. But what you don't see is the life behind the uniform." He paused. A single breath, then another. "For many years I worked as a teacher in another country. I taught history, literature, and philosophy. I believed in young people. I believed in kindness. But when tragedy struck my family, I moved here to rebuild my life. And this job, this uniform, was the first door that opened." A wave of shock moved through the room. Tyler's smirk faded slowly. Miguel continued, voice steadier now. "I clean your hallways, not because I failed, but because life sometimes breaks you before it builds you again. And every day I am reminded of how easily we forget that every person carries a story." His eyes softened. "Some of you laughed at me yesterday, and it hurt, not because of pride, but because disrespect is a seed that grows fast. If you water it with cruelty, it will destroy more than you think." The room stayed silent. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, not a breath out of place. Miguel lowered the microphone slightly, speaking more gently now. "You don't have to know someone's past to treat them with dignity. You don't need to understand someone's life to show kindness, and you don't ever need a reason to be a better human being." A thick, unsettling quiet filled the auditorium. Even the lights seemed to hum softer, as if the entire building were listening. Miguel handed the microphone back to the principal, but it wasn't over. Because the real shift, the real transformation, was about to happen in the hearts of the very students who had laughed at him only the day before. When Miguel stepped away from the microphone, the silence in the auditorium didn't break. It lingered, heavy, thoughtful, almost uncomfortable. The kind of silence that comes when truth hits harder than anyone expects. The principal thanked Miguel softly, placing a hand on his shoulder before turning back to the students. But the audience wasn't looking at the principal. All eyes followed Miguel as he walked down the side steps, slowly, quietly, returning to his place by the wall, almost as if he hoped the world would forget he had just spoken. But no one forgot. Not Tyler, not his friends, not a single person in that room. As students were dismissed and began filing out of the auditorium, whispers replaced the silence. But they weren't mocking this time. They weren't cruel. They were filled with something closer to realization, maybe even shame. Tyler remained sitting long after most people had left. His usual confidence was gone. His face was pale, his hands stiff, his eyes locked on the floor as if the truth Miguel shared kept echoing in his head. Finally, he stood up and walked toward the back door where Miguel was gathering his cleaning cart. Every step felt heavier than the last. Miguel didn't notice him at first. He was adjusting the brooms on the cart, focused on returning to his routine, maybe hoping to disappear again. "Sir," Tyler said quietly. Miguel turned. Tyler swallowed hard before speaking again. I didn't know. I didn't know anything about you." Miguel gave a gentle, tired smile. "Most people don't." Tyler's voice cracked just slightly. "I shouldn't have talked to you that way. I shouldn't have laughed. I'm sorry." Miguel looked at him. Really looked. Without anger. Without judgment. Only a deep, human understanding. "Thank you," Miguel replied softly. "It takes courage to admit when we've been unkind." Tyler lowered his eyes. "It won't happen again." Miguel placed a hand on the handle of his cart. "I believe you." As Tyler stepped aside, something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness alone, but recognition. A bridge forming where a wall once stood. Over the following days, word spread across the school about Miguel's speech. Students who never noticed him before began greeting him in the hallways. Some offered to help carry heavy boxes. Others simply smiled with respect. Even teachers approached him differently, more aware, more appreciative. But Miguel never changed who he was. He still pushed the same cart, still cleaned the same hallways, still walked with quiet humility. The difference wasn't in him. It was in the way people finally saw him. One afternoon, as Miguel swept near the main entrance, Ms. Reynolds approached him. "You know," she said gently, "I think you changed more minds in 10 minutes than we could in an entire year." Miguel chuckled softly. "I don't think I changed them. I just reminded them." "Reminded them of what?" she asked. Miguel rested both hands on the broom, looking out across the hallway filled with students. "That every person matters, even the ones no one sees." Ms. Reynolds nodded slowly. "We're lucky to have you here." Miguel shook his head. "No, I'm the lucky one, because even after everything I've lost, I still get to build something here. And sometimes, that's enough." In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Students stopped using the word "just" when referring to anyone. Just the janitor, just the lunch lady, just the kid from another country. That word faded away, replaced with something better. Respect. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, powerful kind that grows inside a community learning to see people for who they truly are. And as for Tyler, he changed more than anyone expected. He helped Miguel after school. He apologized again, this time with sincerity so clear it didn't need words. He even defended other students when he heard someone being mocked. Not because Miguel asked him to, not because he wanted attention, but because sometimes a single moment, a single voice, a single truth becomes a turning point. And Miguel's voice, once invisible, had become exactly that. The janitor they laughed at, the man they underestimated, the person they never truly saw until he spoke. And from that day on, Ridgewood High would never see him or themselves the same way again.